Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks. We are back with a nice little fight night and news episode. We've got two fight night cards. Obviously, we got last week's recap, this week's preview, and we had a bunch of fights announced yesterday. So we've got a decent amount to talk about here. We're going to focus on the main events for the fight night cards. Then we'll do our standard, final thoughts and wrap up on some of the smaller fights. So that is the game plan for today. We will start at the top of UFC Rio with Charles Oliveira versus Mateusz Gamrot. Charles goes out there in front of his home crowd, gets the second round submission. Jerry, we can throw it over to you first. What did you make of Charles Oliveira's performance?
He bounced back from that nasty knockout against Ilia Topuria not that long ago really, really well. And he went back to what his bread and butter is, taking you down and getting the submission. There's a reason he has the most submissions, the most finishes in UFC history. And he showed that in front of his home crowd, which I can't remember when the last time he fought, because he was from Rio, isn't he?
Last time he fought in Brazil was the Kevin Lee fight.
Yeah.
I think in 2019. It was the and that ends up being a funny fight card as well, because that is the COVID fight card. Yes. That's like everyone was in Brazil, and the U.S. was or everyone in the U.S. was like, oh, we got to shut down. We got to stop playing sports. And the UFC was like, well, we're already in Brazil. So we'll have the fight, so then we'll fly home afterwards. So that was the last sporting event before the COVID shutdown.
Yeah. God. But anyway, he came in. He looked pretty good. He looked a lot better than we've seen in a couple of recent fights. Kind of looked like his past self. Don't know if it's really warrant much, because Gamrot's just I think this is Gamrot's peak type thing. I don't see him ever fighting at much higher than that 8 to 5 range. So I always thought Oliveira was going to win this, and it was just a matter of time until he actually got the finish.
Yeah, I didn't get to see this fight, but from everything, it sounded like it was, an Oliveira throwback, like you were saying, where I'm glad he got the submission. That's why he holds that record. And I agree, too. I thought he matched up well with Gamrot, too, so I thought that was definitely a possibility for what could happen. But I'll always, be hype or anything when someone can get it done in front of their home crowd, too, main event. That's always nice to see. That's one of the things that makes the UFC special, is the fighters coming from across the globe, and the fact that we can have fight nights there and have hometown people headline and stuff. So that's always a little bit of a storybook ending for the night too, when that happens.
Yeah, I agree that it was a pretty good style matchup for Charles, who got there and do what he did. But I also think that Charles deserves a lot of credit for bouncing back with the Topuria loss, because, I mean, that was June 28th, and knockouts like that, like, he was out bad there, and you would like to see a guy take a lot more time off than what he did, and he really rushed in there to get in there for this one, and he still performed. So, like, to me, that was the most impressive part of this fight, is the turnaround. And then, not to say, like, obviously, I think this was a good matchup for Charles, but Charles has been, put on his back against some guys, whether it be Sarukian, Makhachev. Like, there was a route here for Gamrot to go out and look good, and Charles took that route away as well. I thought he got taken down in the first round. He eventually got to sweep, got back to top. Second round, he lands a takedown of his own, which is even more impressive, and works to a good position. It's not like he accidentally, or it's not like he caught Gamrot in a Gamrot mistake. Like, he took Gamrot down, worked to the back, choked him out. And to me, that's what is really impressive about how he did it. Because the things that I don't like about Gamrot, if he would have went out there and knocked Gamrot out in the first round, I would have been like, yeah, it's pretty easy to hit Gamrot on the chin. Yeah. Like, that's kind of what I expect from you. But to go out there and route him into grappling, I think is a really impressive way to beat Gamrot, even if it was a stylistic matchup that was easier than some other guys. And also, he had it was a late replacement for Gamrot, so maybe that played a little bit into Gamrot's performance. But the alternative is Oliveira was preparing for Rafael Fiziev, who is there a more polar opposite guy than Mateusz Gamrot? Like, he had to really switch up what he was doing from a camp perspective as well. So a lot of the outside stuff, I give a lot of credit to Charles for still going in and performing well.
Yeah, and I mean, it was also the first time that Gamrot's ever been finished in his career. So got to give him props where props is due. Being the first to do anything like that to a guy who's been so durable is pretty impressive.
Yeah. And then moving forward for Charles, he had his call out of Max Holloway. It seems like a pretty unanimous, like, oh, yeah, I think that's a good idea. But I still want to touch on the topic as well. Anthony, we can swing it over to you first. Is Max Holloway for the BMF title, which Charles threw out there, is that a fight you want to see next, or is there a different matchup that is more interesting for you for Charles or for Max for that matter?
No, I definitely think that's a good one. I think we've talked about that before. Well, we like in our matchmaking stuff we'll do sometimes. I did see though, like Charles maybe wanted the White House, and Max. I saw Max was saying he would rather do it springtime, and that if you're calling me out, it's going to be on my, it's up to me. So that was the only thing is, it's because it did seem like Max was interested too in that clip I saw, or the article I was reading. But overall, I mean, I think that's two of the most exciting guys in the UFC, and two huge fan favorites as well. So I think that's a spot on fight right there that everyone would appreciate.
Yeah, you said everything that I was thinking. It's two fun guys that can probably throw down a very fun fight. It's at the end of the day, is Charles going to take Max down, or is he going to just stand there and swing with Max for 5 rounds? I'd assume that'd be a main event, or at least a co-main or something on a pay-per-view for the BMF belt. So that would be, I think that's the fight to make, because not necessarily as much for Max, but Charles has fought everybody else who's in that range of people who he should be fighting.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense as well. And I don't really have much to add other than, I'd like to see it in the springtime. So I don't really want to wait until June, July, whenever they're doing that White House card to see that fight. So I'd like to see it in the springtime. And, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think this was, one that we threw out there as a match we'd like to see before Charles was booked against Fiziev. So I think we're getting one, and I think it's probably an even better, more hype fight now that Charles is coming off a win and not that loss to Deporia. It probably makes it even better than it would have been had we just seen that fight. And Max has bounced back from his Deporia loss as well, so both guys coming off wins adds a little bit more to the hype. So I think it makes sense all around and should be a good one. All right, Jerry, we can throw it over to you first here. UFC Rio. We talked about the main event. What are some other things that stood out to you from this Rio card?
One of the most heavyweight knockouts you'd ever see. Vitor Petrino beating Thomas Peterson. Petrino pretty much just threw a right overhand, it seemed like, just threw his right, knocked him. The dude looks like he does the worm on the way down and just out cold. Typical, that's your stereotypical heavyweight knockout. One guy with no skill fighting another guy with no skill, throws a big shot, it lands, and the guy's out cold. So that was a pretty nasty one. Otherwise, I was impressed with Joel Alvarez against Vicente Luque. And in the aspect that I did think Alvarez was going to come in and try and muscle him out, and we've seen his power at lightweight, but coming up to welterweight, he didn't miss a beat. He got more takedowns. He completely outstruck Vicente Luque and just looked really good doing so, and that's why it was 30-26 on all 3 scorecards.
My 2, I would say, 1, that's why Luque needs to retire. He probably shouldn't be fighting still, but I know maybe he still loves it. I would say we probably should have started thinking about that after the brain bleed, and now it's like 4 fights removed, and some beatdowns like this are still happening. And then the only other one I saw was for the Lucas Almeida one. He clearly came into that fight with like a broken hand, and probably has to get his money to provide for the people in his life, has to take on the fight still. And then the ref just won't call it. And I saw he was just getting brutalized. It's like, this dude's already in there with one hand. You're going to he's not coming back. So I just thought that was an unfortunate for someone that thinks refs should. I wouldn't mind seeing more damage sometimes. I don't think that was the fight to like test out that.
Yeah, I agree, and I will also add that Michael Aswell knockout was some of the freest money I've ever got, and the only regret is not having 2 zeros at the end of the amount that I put on it. But this ended up being a pretty good card. A lot of really exciting fights. One that wasn't too exciting, co-main event: Davison Figueiredo, Montel Jackson. But I think Figgy deserves some credit for bouncing back after losses against some of the best in the division. An injury in the fight against Sandhagen, goes out there and gets the win over a really, really respected prospect and a guy who I think is good in Montel Jackson. So I'll give Figgy some credit for that. Con Offley, I thought Con Offley was going to be good coming off the Ultimate Fighter. Then he lost 2 fights. He gets in the win column here. I was probably wrong saying he was going to be good, but that's the guy that I like seeing bounce back because I think he's a touch on the underrated side. And then Jafel Filo, nasty Kimura against Clayton Carpenter. And that was another impressive performance, and Jafel Filo slowly becoming one of the most underrated grapplers in that 125-pound division because that Kimura was disgusting.
Yeah.
All right. Moving over to UFC Vancouver. This is a Canadian fight card, which means they put Canadian fighters on the card, which means it's not a great card. But the main event, Reinier de Ridder versus Brendan Allen. This is not the fight that we were originally getting. It was originally supposed to be Reinier de Ridder versus Anthony Hernandez. That was going to be one of the fights that I was looking forward to most to close out this calendar year in the fourth quarter for the UFC. But instead, we got Brendan Allen stepping in, taking the fight on short notice. Anthony, I think it's your turn to lead us off. What do you make of this middleweight matchup?
Like you said, I think the DDR Hernandez is arguably one of the best fights you could put on in that division. Even even one of the most hyped fights, I'd say, across multiple weight classes too. In general, I just think those were 2 big surging. I don't want to say stars, but surging people to fight for the belt, contenders. That would be a better contender matchup that you could make compared to other weight classes. So it's unfortunate. But now I still think it's fair. I still think it has its interest, as in de Ridder can still be tested. I feel like we still haven't seen a whole lot from him. He's been there's the Whitaker fight and stuff, and he got the Bo Nickel upset win. But I still think it's fair just to you want to see contenders fight top guys consistently too before they get that belt. So I think here it is. There's another test here in front of them, and that Whitaker one was pretty close with I think it ended up being split, but with some of those rounds. So this is a fight I would like to see more dominant, maybe, especially if we were talking title talks for him, maybe the winner of him versus Fluffy jumping Imavov, if someone had like a masterful performance. I think this one can't be like another split. It's going to need to be like a convincing beatdown or like a finish too. So, but there was also worse pivots than Brendan Allen. So I think that's at that level too. It's you'll take it.
Yeah, I'm with you in a lot of that aspect. It's one that obviously you want the Fluffy Hernandez fight. Sadly, we don't get it. Brendan Allen instead. And Brendan Allen's fought some entertaining guys and some good guys, but I think this is one of his harder tests outside of like obviously Fluffy and then Nasruddin Imavov, who you've just mentioned both of. It's one like, how much do you take from that win over Marvin Vettori in his last fight out? I personally don't take a lot from it. Otherwise, before that, it's Chris Curtis, Paul Craig, Bruno Silva, all guys who are kind of at the back end or lower ends of their careers. RDR, meanwhile, since he's been in the UFC, has 3 finishes and then the Robert Whitaker split decision. Bo Nickel, obviously still up and coming. Kevin Holland is Kevin Holland, so you never know what kind of fighter you're going to get to see when he fights. The Robert Whitaker fight, as much as it could have gone either way, RDR did what he had to do, and I think definitely deserved that win. I just think there might have been a better fight for this. I wouldn't have mind seeing RDR against like an Izzy or a Sean Strickland instead of Brendan Allen, but Brendan Allen does something that neither of those guys do, which is grapple, and I think that's where we could see a very, very entertaining side of this fight with two guys who have very strong submission games. Brendan Allen has 14 submissions, RDR is 13 in his career, and it's one that I wouldn't be surprised if we see some really impressive ground game here.
Yeah, I'm not mad at this fight as far as short notice replacements go. Like, you can do a lot worse than Brendan Allen. But I do think it really limits RDR's potential to really cement himself as a title challenger, especially after what Imavov did. Not to say Imavov couldn't have been topped, but it's a lot easier to top his performance when you're going up against a guy in Anthony Hernandez instead of a guy in Brendan Allen who Anthony Hernandez beat and Imavov beat. It's like, all right, well, it's a little bit harder to get excited about beating Brendan Allen after the guys that we're discussing in title talks have all beat him. So if you beat him, it kind of feels more like you're doing what you're supposed to do rather than elevating to a standard that meets getting a title fight. So it kind of really forces the Ritter to go out there and look amazing. Like, he can't really have any flaws. And even if he goes out there and has a wonderful fight, it still might not be enough, unfortunately. But I do think it's an interesting matchup just from Brendan Allen being a really good grappler. I'm interested to see if he can defensively grapple at all because he's probably the better striker. But then that raises a whole new question of, you've got the Ritter's size, how does that play into the fight, especially in striking exchanges? So I think this is going to be an interesting fight. Betting odds have it currently lined with Reinier de Ridder as a minus 210 favorite and Brendan Allen a plus 162 underdog. Personally, I think this is going to be a good performance from de Ridder is kind of what I'm expecting here. I might get concerned if he gets, dragged into the later rounds, but I think the size is going to be the thing in this fight that really sets us apart. I don't know how much success he'll have in the feet. He might land some big shots, but Brendan Allen is a good grappler, but he's coming off, 2 fights ago, he got out-grappled by Anthony Hernandez. So it's not like this guy's a perfect grappler. And Hernandez and de Ridder are much, much different grapplers. But the difference being one of them is de Ridder is humongous. I mean, the guy was the light heavyweight champion in one championship. He fought heavyweight over there once. It didn't go well for him, but he's now fighting in middleweight. Like, he's going to be huge against everybody he fights here. And I think if he gets on top of Brendan Allen at all, he could really wear on him and probably land a submission. So I like Reinier de Ridder here from a size and probably also being the better grappler. So he's probably both of those things in this matchup, bigger and better on the ground.
If I had to go, I would also be going RDR here too for a lot of the same things that you just mentioned. But I do think too, though, you kind of mentioned it when you first started, essentially with the no fluffy here. This win will, like I said, be another addition to the resume or whatever, and maybe get him, another more important fight. But I feel like there's no way he can hop Imavov now with a win over Brendan Allen. I feel like, and that was Fluffy's only chance too, because I imagine Fluffy's next fight, you're not going to get a bigger fight than RDR. Will probably be another middle of the pack guy, or maybe one of the older guys too, if they feed him one of them. But I feel like this kind of makes it Imavov is getting the next title now that, and these two almost lost their instant, maybe we get the next one now that the fight fell through.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm still leaning RDR in this, and I still think he has the chance to get a title shot at some point next year, but he's going to have to wait his turn, and I do think that a win over Brendan Allen isn't, no matter how impressive, unless he comes out and does a flying knee in the first 5 seconds or submits him with something crazy in the first minute, I don't think it's going to warrant any title shots next for him. I think we still need to see him fight a Sean Strickland or a DDP, or if they decide not to give it right to Imavov, which I think would be stupid, run those two at each other and winner gets the title shot. But I think this is just a stepping stone towards one more fight and then a title if he gets best.
Yeah, and from a timeline perspective, Imavov is set up much more for getting that fight just because he fought several months ago at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And De Ridder has been fighting frequently, but they could literally already be in talks with Chimaev and Imavov trying to figure out when they're going to have that fight. And it's not the end of the world for De Ridder because, you know, if you go win this one, those two guys fight in the first quarter of 2025. Maybe you need one more, maybe you don't. Like, and, you know, maybe this win then gets him, you know, a big name, or maybe he can just go out there and fight Anthony Hernandez. And now those guys are in a position where they're going to fight the winner of Strickland of Chimaev and Imavov. And they don't really have to go out there and try and look amazing. They just have to go out there and win. That might also be the case we find ourselves in. So I think this is a good fight, but I do think it's, you know, lost the steam of being a potential title elimination bout. All right, looking at the rest of UFC Vancouver, Jerry, I think it's your turn to go first here. What else stands out to you from this card? I think we have 3 more ranked matchups on the main card. Everything else after that gets us to unranked territory. It's not a terrible card, but it's nothing that really gets you too excited, at least in my opinion. What are you looking at for the rest of this card?
Also, one fight that it might not be the most exciting fight, but I think it's probably the fight with the biggest implications is Manon Fiorot and Jasmine Judavicius. We already know Zhang Weili and Valentina Shevchenko are going to be fighting. I think it's at 322. Weili's moving up to fight for the flyweight title. Depending on what happens in this fight, the winner could potentially be next in line for a title shot. I would think it'd be Natalia Silva after her win against Alexa Grasso, getting the next title shot, but you never know with the UFC. Maybe it is one of these two, but either way, a win for either puts them in a great position to potentially get a title shot in the near future. Otherwise, what I think just might be fun is anytime Matt Frivola fights, it seems like it's just throw hands to the wind and see what happens. I think him and Kyle Nelson can be a very entertaining fight.
I like Charles Jourdain, Davy Grant for the prelims. I feel like that's a fun little prelim card, that would normally be on the main card in a fight night. So, and then I don't know if I want to say I'm like excited. Kevin Holland kind of ruined me after that last fight. I was really believing in him that, you know, and then he just gets pieced up by D-Rod. But sure, I still think Mike Vallot has had some good wins. I know he had that slip up a couple fights ago, but that one's fine for the co-main. And then I will say I do like, because Zahabi's last fight is still the Jose robbery, right? But I think there's a chance to get on some fans' good graces with just another win. And I do think Marlon Vera is extremely beatable because he throws like 5 strikes around. So you just have to avoid those 5 strikes and you should be able to win a decision.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting spots on this card. I second a lot of what you guys said. I think that Jazz and Manon Fiorot fight's really important. Interested to see him like Mike Malott versus Kevin Holland. Those are both 2 guys where I kind of look at them and go, what am I going to get out of this guy today? Like, and they're in there against each other, and boy, does that raise some questions. And then Cheeto versus Zahabi, like, wow, this could be a great fight if Cheeto fights. Like, but it's Cheeto, so like probably not. I don't know. Some other fights I'm looking at, the Jourdain and Davy Grant should be a good one. Bruno Silva versus Hyung Sung Park. Park is coming back. I believe this is his first fight since his short notice main event against Tetsuro Taira. So I'm interested to see how he manages to bounce back from that loss. And then Danny Barlow was a guy that I loved coming off Contenders. Had some weird fights, broke his hand or arm a couple times, and Now he's moving up to middleweight, and I'm really don't know if I love that move, but he's fighting to Jordan Santos. So anytime Danny Barlow's fighting, I'll be tuning in just because off Contenders, I listed him as one of my favorite prospects from the season. So I would like to see him win some fights, preferably. And it'd be even better if he looked good doing it. So personally, we'll have my eyes on Danny Barlow. All right. That is UFC Rio and UFC Vancouver. In the review, go ahead.
Just wanted a question for you because I meant to ask earlier but forgot about it. Jose Aldo getting honored at UFC Rio. Do you think that was a nice touch by the UFC, or do you think it's kind of unnecessary since he's been retired for a little bit?
I like it, but I don't like it because it's Jose Aldo and Rio, so give him the moment. But at the same time, it feels like I've seen 7 Jose Aldo retirements, and kind of takes the shine away every time when I've seen this 6 times. But they're in Rio, and he's the king of Rio, so I can't really hate.
And he's not obviously like in the Hall of Fame or anything yet, or is he already?
Yeah,
he's okay. Because I was gonna say I know he's like been retired and came back. I didn't know if he had one more thing they'd give him to where they'd do a full. But like you said, I know we've seen it a bunch. So
yeah, I mean that's kind of where my head was at as well. So I was just curious what you guys thought about it.
Yeah, I don't really have much else to add outside of that. All right, let's swing it over to UFC 323, I believe.
Yeah.
Boy, we're getting to big numbers here on these UFC pay-per-views. All right. The UFC announced a bunch of fights for this card. This is the December card. It is the last ESPN pay-per-view before they swing over to Paramount. So we're just going to give our thoughts on some of these fights that were booked. We'll obviously focus on the big ones. And the biggest one of them all is the main event, Merab Dvalishvili versus Petr Yan. Anthony, you can take it away here. What do you make of this being the fight they went with at bantamweight for the title?
I thought it made sense. I mean, I'd have to look at the rankings, but I know, like I thought Sandhagen was the most deserving. Merab was able to just beat him, recently. I'm surprised by how quick the turnaround is. I will say that. And then I think Yan is, one of the next most deserving. And with all that Merab's done, and he keeps getting past people. I think Yan was on that 3-fight skid, lost his belt, everything, and has gotten. Now he's on a 3-fight win streak, I believe. And he even took his. He beat 2 good people, 2 highly ranked top 5s, and then even did some dirty work and fought off a prospect in his last one that he probably dipped too far in the rankings to even be fighting. And put his name on the line. So. If Merab wants to fight again, I think he's going for his 4th defense this year, which is insane. I think Jan's a good one to end it on, and at least for the year to end his title defenses on. And I think it should be a good one. Hopefully, it's. I don't want to see 49 takedowns again, but it's Merab, so we'll see.
I guess more of the question is what will Petr Yan do differently to avoid being taken down 49 times? What can he do as well? Because like you said, it was a weird fight when they fought the first time, and that was he's had some good wins since. He's kind of returned. Obviously, the Marcus McGee was a weird matchup for Petr Yan. I don't know why he took it, but he did take it, and the UFC seems to be rewarding him with a title shot off the back of that. On the other side, Merab he is the machine for a reason. His 4th title defense, if he does it successfully, he'll be the first fighter ever to defend his title 4 times in 1 calendar year. Which that's just insane compared to some of our other title holders who will fight once every 18 months. Not saying certain names, but one of them's moving up and actually fighting soon. So there is that. But it's one it also makes sense because he's not going to fight O'Malley again. Umar didn't deserve it. He just beat Corey Sandhagen. That leaves you Song Yadong, Figueiredo. We know how all those fights are going to go, probably. So, should be fun. I'm excited. It'll be entertaining between 2 of the best in this division.
Yeah, I agree. I'm happy this matchup got booked. I think Jan was the most deserving. He's put in the groundwork to earn the rematch. And a lot more has come out recently about Jan potentially being injured in that fight. Rumors he had a broken hand. I believe it. Like, he just didn't really do much in that fight other than stand there and defend takedowns. And we've talked about this before a little bit. I remember way, way back before we even had the podcast when we were doing the Daily Show. We talked about Moreno and Figueiredo, I believe it was. Or no, it was Moreno Pantoja. When Moreno broke his hand and we were talking about trying to defend takedowns with a broken hand. How do you hand fight somebody when your hand's broken? Like, it might be harder to defend takedowns than to strike if you only have one hand. And that's what Jan was tasked with doing. And I know there's other rumors that he hurt one of his legs or his knee or something lower body in the early portions of that fight as well. And to me, that fight looks like a big outlier in both of those guys' careers. Like, it looks like a big outlier in Jan's, but yeah, Merab's always been active, but that fight looks a lot differently than the Sandhagen fight, than either of those O'Malley fights, than any other fight that he's had. So I'm looking at that fight as an outlier for both guys, and I think this one can turn out pretty differently. So I'm interested to see how this fight plays out. And also, I picked Petr Yan to be the bantamweight champion at the end of the year, so we are still alive. This did not go the route that I thought it was going to go when I made that selection almost 8 months ago now. But here we are, Petr Yan, in December for all the marbles. So I am personally happy about that aspect of this as well.
And who knows? They said, Pereira had some injury rumors about that first Goliath fight. Now he looked fully, or at least more healthy in the rematch, and then that happens. So you never know.
Yeah, and Petr tweeted something after that fight, like, "Remember, guys, rematches aren't always the same, and you never know what guys were going through in the first fight." And I was like, "Oh, well, okay, Petr. I mean, we'll see." But all right.
And if anyone can do it against Merab, Petr Yan's probably the best there is in this division. I still think he beat O'Malley in that fight, and I think he's the second best fighter in this division. Might even be the best. We'll find out in December.
Well, that was the only thing is I thought, we said he had some tools and stuff, and like everyone was excited for that fight, and just the way it played out was horrendous for like anything. So that was always one to like. Normally people don't like to give that's not something you'd give a rematch for with how bad that kind of ended up turning into a steamrolling. But at the same time, it's like we didn't even get to like fully see if certain game plans or whatever that we thought might give Jan the advantage. Like nothing like that played out at all. So it's almost like it can be a completely fresh new fight, or it can be like the first time it happened with with slight changes for Jan actually showing up and doing what he does.
Yeah, and that first fight was Petr Yan was a pretty big favorite. I think Merab was a plus 200 or more underdog, and a lot of people weren't really interested in the dog price at Merab. And now that's flipped. I think Yan is plus 250 or so at the current odds. So he is now the big underdog, and rarely do you see corrections like that over the course of one fight to a second fight, let alone, I think it's been a couple years at this point, but still, anytime you're seeing lines move plus 400 or 400 points and more, like that is a pretty unique situation that we find ourselves in. Yeah, Jan currently plus 240. It's moved at least 440 points on the line, so that is quite the flip there in contrast to the first fight.
I don't hate those odds.
Yeah, me neither. I'll tell you that much. All right. Co-main event, Alexandre Pantoja versus Joshua Van. This was one that I think was one that we saw coming, and I think a lot of people saw coming. Jerry, what do you make of the flyweight title co-main event?
It's the only one that makes sense. I mean, you look at Pantoja, he's beat Moreno twice, he's beat Royval twice. Merab doesn't deserve a title shot. He beat Tatsuro. Oh, no, he beat Kaya Sakura. and he just beat Kai Kara France last, so it makes sense. Joshua Van's put in the work this year. As of now, he's fought 4 times in the last 12 months. It'll be just under that when they fight at UFC 323, I think. Oh, no, it'll be his 5th fight in the calendar in the last 12 months when he fights Pantoja at UFC 323, which is crazy. Things you love to see of anyone fighting for a championship, and that's why I think Joshua Van's really deserved it. He's looked good. He looked really good against Brandon Royval, which was the biggest test of his career. And forget, did he take that on shortish notice?
Yes, because that was originally supposed to be a knockout.
Yeah, so him stepping in on short notice to fight, that was very impressive win. And does he beat Pantoja? That's a hell of a different question. Pantoja is going into his 5th title defense and has made it look very, very easy, especially in the last 2.
Yeah, I agree. That's why, too, when I was doing the little article just on the fight announcement, I think this is probably the most entertaining or hype fight Pantoja's had in about three fights. Then I also think this might be one of his biggest defenses. If not, it depends how you count the Royval, but I would almost count the Van defenses more than in the last 3 fights he's been matched up with. But I think this is you're getting one of the fan favorites in Van, like you said, because he's so active. He's had some finishes at least, but he puts on entertaining fights, if that. So I think overall this is a good, and even if maybe they did luck into it, like you said, this is the only option. I think this is a great spot for it too. End of the year, I think Van finally gets his shot, and it's funny because there's similar fighters and how dominant they've been, and I mean different styles for sure, but to where Merab might be a little less entertaining. I've still been a huge fan of Pantoja and his title reign, and I've found them all entertaining. So I think this one, now being on the full side of Van getting the title shot, to where maybe in a couple other ones I would have liked to see them go in other directions. I think this is about as good as it gets for someone, and they're, like you said, I think 5th for their 5th title defense or 4th. But
yeah, I've loved the Pantoja title reign, and I think this might be, I don't know if it's his toughest matchup. I don't know if that would be accurate, but I think this is the one that he would get maybe the most credit for. And maybe not today, but I think when you look at his career in the long term, and in hindsight, maybe 2 years down the line, you can look at this one and really circle it if he gets the job done, because this is when you start beating the next generation. A lot of the guys that he has beat, all great fighters, like all great defenses. But when you throw a Josh Van in there like that, you're now taking out a new generation of fighter. And that is something that I think elevates your title reign from a very, very good title reign to a higher level. Like we haven't seen Merab start to do that, for example. Like it's all currently the same generation of fighter. And part of that is because Merab hasn't had the opportunity. So that's part of the reason. But, it's very rare that guys can start knocking off a new generation of fighter. And that is always very impressive to me when guys are doing that. And Josh Van as well, his skills are great. Like his boxing is outstanding. He hits hard. His pace is great. His body work is great. I'm interested to see what the striking exchanges look like here. And I'm interested to see how Josh Van performs in the grappling. Like, could you imagine if Josh Van goes out there, defends takedowns, and just nullifies Pantoja's grappling and gets his striking going like he usually does? Like, that would be, if he's able to accomplish that would be one of the more impressive things you could imagine someone doing at flyweight at this point. So I'm really stoked for this fight, and I'm pumped here because I think I like both of these guys, Pantoja and Josh Van, and I think it'll be a great, great fight.
Yeah, and I mean, if anything shows us what Joshua Van's all about, he's going to throw punches and bunches. His fight with Brandon Royval holds the record, at least in flyweight, for most significant strikes landed, attempted, most strikes landed and attempted. And it's not particularly close. I will say the fun part is the second most total strikes landed, Pantoja and Royval. So that means we're getting Pantoja and Joshua Van, and if he can keep this on the feet, because Pantoja is not afraid to stand and strike, and he has some serious power for 125. That this could be a very, 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 very fun fight.
And that was a 3-round too.
Yeah, the
So
Pantoja.
that definitely would have
Royval.
shattered.
No, the Van. You're right.
Yeah, Van
Yeah,
Royval.
you're right.
And then I also saw for that article, Van's currently number 1 for significant strikes per minute. I think he has like 8.69. So it makes sense why he is such a fan favorite. But I also thought, kind of like James was saying, it's like a little immovable object versus unstoppable force. As in, I think obviously Pantoja has the phenomenal grappling, and he's had the chin that has yet to crack yet. And Van on the other side has really good takedown defense, and that's part of the, when someone has such great boxing, how do you beat them? Or you try to take them down. Well, he actually has really good takedown defense too. So I'm curious to see if that takedown defense will hold, or Pantoja's grappling will win out, or if Pantoja's chin will hold, and we'll see how against Van's, elite boxing. So I think there is. I would hate to say quite just like wrestler striker matchup, but I do think this should be a fun one as well.
Yeah, and then kind of off the back of this main event and co-main event, in my eyes, this kind of sets a clear collision course for Merab and Pantoja if they both win. If one of them loses, point null and void. But if Merab wins, he's going to be looking at the winner of Umar and Mario Bautista, which I don't think people are going to be pounding the table for. That feels like a fight we can skip over, especially if it's Umar, who he's already beat. And if it's Mario, well, we don't need a reason to fuck Mario. Like, we're willing to skip him over at the slightest chance we get. Meanwhile, you can say the same for Pantoja. Part of the reason the Josh Van fight made so much sense is because you kind of look around and go, what the hell else is he going to do? Like, so in my opinion, this kind of sets it would kind of end up being a Pantoja going up to bantamweight to fight Merab. I know they've kind of talked against that recently, but to me, this is kind of what this sets up. Do you guys agree or disagree? Jerry, we can swing it over to you first.
I think the only way we don't see that is if Tatsuro Taira, who's fighting in the same card, comes out and beats Brandon Moreno, therefore being a new challenger for Pantoja. That's the only way I don't see this happening, is because they've both made it clear that they want to clear out the division completely, which that's what you're meant to do before you want to try and move up for a second belt. Unlike a lot of the guys now who one title fight, you get one defense maybe, and then you try and move up. No, this is the way you're meant to do it, and this is the way it should be done, where you're clearing out a division. So if Moreno wins against Tatsuro Taira, then by all means, go ahead, Pantoja, you've earned it. But if Taira wins, I could see Pantoja hanging around for one more fight, and just because he wants to make sure that there is nobody else in that division.
I agree. I really like that Pantoja Moreno fight. I think that's a super fun fight too. So I'm excited. I would still think, and I've always said this, and I'll die on this hill still, but I still always wanted to see a Moreno Pantoja again, because when I was doing that, Pantoja's been subbing people recently, dominating them that way. He's had 2 unanimous decisions. He still beat Moreno in a split decision where Moreno broke his hand in that fight. And obviously, I don't think that was Moreno's, best fight with that broken hand. And that's the one that's the split. Recently, Pantoja's been so dominant. The last time he wasn't dominant was that fight. So I've always still wanted to see that again. And that depends on how because Moreno's looked great against Urseg, Albazi, dropped that one to Royval. So that's Moreno's fault for not getting that, because if he beats that, he would have fought again for the belt. But I mean, I think it does depend on how he looks in this one. Same with Taira. If kind of like we're talking back with the fluffy Reinier de Ritter, you truly need a great performance, or one that gets the fans excited to maybe jump or put your hat in the ring. But regardless if it is time for Pantoja to move up, I'm all for it. I think he deserves it. I think he's had a really phenomenal title run, and I think the Merab fight is actually really entertaining too. So And it gives Merab someone else to fight too, which is nice.
Do you think there's any chance that Merab moves up?
I think that's less likely than Pantoja moving up.
Okay.
And part of that is because both these guys have talked about, like we've talked about this several times, but both these guys want to clear out their divisions. Like you said, I just think that Pantoja moving up to fight Merab solves both guys needing a guy to fight. Meanwhile, you've got enough guys at 45 to where it's a little bit harder to justify Merab going up, even though he's done everything you can ask for in his weight class. The current state of featherweight, I think, is harder to make that
justify
move up.
it.
Yeah, harder to justify. Meanwhile, if you book Pantoja Merab and go, well, we just didn't want to see Mario Bautista versus Merab, so we're going to give Pantoja the shot with all those featherweights to try and find someone to fight. Like, yeah, I think everybody goes, yeah, that makes sense to me. So,
yeah.
All right. Last fight we'll talk about in depth for news. This is not a title fight, but man, this one caught me by surprise, and it sounds like it did for the rest of us. Henry Cejudo versus Payton Talbott. Was not on my bingo card. Wouldn't have been a fight that I would have thought to say could be booked. Wouldn't have been a fight that I'd throw out there as a potential future matchup. Needless to say, I didn't see it coming, but we have what is now a massive opportunity against Payton Talbott, moving up in the rankings, fighting a guy who is going to be a future champion, two-division or future Hall of Famer, 2-division champion. So massive opportunity for Payton Talbott. Anthony, we can swing it over to you first. What do you think of this being the matchup booked for these two?
Yeah, I was very surprised as well. I think, I like Talbot and everything, and I guess it is the tip of the cap. He's fighting Cejudo, who's, older, ranked 10, so a win here is massive. Immediately, boom, you're in the rankings. I do think it's funny, though, like, I can't remember, I was talking to my friend, because we both said the same thing, like, didn't expect that. And he also thought Cejudo, just might win, but I was like, they're really giving him wrestlers here. They're really, like, testing him out, which it was funny. He was like, yeah, it's definitely not no Paddy Pimblett or like Sean O'Malley trajectory where they're feeding him easy wins and striker versus striker matchups where he can get a knockout. They've given him 3 wrestlers in a row now, or like they're really testing him with people that can wrestle. There's no easy striking matchup, which I think is funny. But that could be good or bad. Maybe if he can get past this, he's looking really, really good for the future, and that 10 spot's really deserving for him in the rankings, which I'd assume if he wins, or if not, I still think at the end of the day, losing to Cejudo is not like, it's not the end all be all. That's the fact that you're getting in there with a legend who has a specific skill set that might give you some trouble. We'll see, but I think it's a wild, interesting fight. I thought there were other matchups, but I'm still on board for it.
Yeah, when I saw this, I thought it was a meme account. At first, I was like, oh, there's no way this fight's actually happening. Then looked into it, and yeah, it is. Which, he spoke a lot on what it means for Payton Talbott. For Henry Cejudo, coming off 3-fight losing streak, this could be the end of the road if he loses to a guy who's unranked. We all know the potential and talent Payton Talbott has. But if you're losing to an unranked guy at 38 years old, it might be the last thing we see Henry Cejudo do. So this could be him fighting for his career, and that makes him dangerous and also probably very, very motivated to go out there and put on a good performance.
Yeah, and I think this is interesting because we had that Cejudo versus Song Yadong fight that was weird. But while they were fighting, I thought it was a good fight. I was enjoying that fight. And then I go online afterwards, and everyone's like, man, that sucked. And I was like, I might have been watching something different. I was having a good experience. I thought that was a good fight. And Dana was like, yeah, that was terrible. We don't need to see that again. And I was like, I'm not really sure what's going on here. But point being is Cejudo was like, yeah, I would like to do that rematch. I'd like to fight him again. And the UFC was basically like, no, we don't need any more of you. And going back in when he was a champion, he said, I think I'm going to retire if you don't pay me more money. And then the UFC said, hey, you hear that? Henry's gone. Like Henry said, no more. Hey, he's leaving. And so the relationship between Henry and the UFC has never been a great one. Even going back to when he was trying to get back to fight for the title. And it took a lot of convincing, it felt like, to get him in that title fight. And it just feels like everything that Henry has been booked to do since he returned and did that retirement thing, it kind of feels like it's been the UFC being like, I guess. And now it kind of feels like the UFC being like, you want one more? We'll give you one more. His name's Payton Talbott. And then Henry Cejudo said, oh, I guess. Like, it just feels like these two sides just can't get along, and we're just trying to, move it along here. And I mean, for Henry, like, Henry's amount that he's been grappling has been going down in recent years. Like, he's the older you get, the less fun it is to grapple. And man, I'm interested to see what this looks like if he can't get his grappling going, because it might be Dana White and Hunter Campbell might be, octagon side smiling and laughing if Henry can't land some takedowns here, because Talbot is much bigger than the former flyweight in Henry Cejudo. So I'm really interested in this fight. I think this is a baffling fight that I never saw coming, which kind of makes it even more interesting than one you can see coming. So I'm pumped here for this main card, and they did a good job filling this card out with some good fights. I don't think we're going to see too many, it's not the most stacked for name value or ranking positions, but I think this fight card to close out the ESPN deal is going to be a good one. These three fights are all good fights in my opinion, and they filled it out with a lot of fights that I consider fun fights. So I think that got a good fight card here on our hands.
Yeah. I mean, even some of the other fights that they've kind of rumored or announced should be entertaining.
Yeah, I agree. All right,
I was going to say, I do think it's kind of funny that, as they're ending their ESPN deal, we have a flyweight fight in the co-main. And for years, as we've watched ESPN, we've had to watch heavyweight slop for the main events and everything, and all the flyweights and lower division weight classes are buried on cards. The last card of the deal has 4 lighter weight classes as the main draw. I just thought that was kind of funny.
Meanwhile, sitting here going, this is a great card. This is going to be a whole lot of fun. Yeah, I wonder why.
Exactly. Hey, don't forget about the other card that's apparently on the main card, or other fight on the main card, Jan Blachowicz and Bogdan Guskov.
Yeah, that's actually a good fight as well.
Yeah,
for as much as I'm not a light heavyweight fan,
No,
I do like that fight. I mean,
it makes
to
sense.
see how long old man Jan can keep putting together these performances, because he hasn't been fighting bad.
I think it's going to be funny if the bout order they have on the UFC website is correct, going from Tyron Moreno to Van and Pantoja is going to be a hell of a pace difference in 3 straight fights.
That is true. That is very true. All right. Do you guys have anything to add here before we close out this week's episode? I think next week we're back with a pay-per-view, if my math is correct.
Yes.
But for right now, anything to close out this week before we call it?
No, got nothing.
I'm excited. Yeah.
Go ahead, Anthony.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I'm excited that it's I forgot we actually had another pay-per-view this month. So that, that is nice. Especially we missed the last one, so we'll get back to it.
Yeah, and hey, we sacrificed September for no pay-per-views for 2 good ones this year, and we finally get to see Tom Aspinall fight, which I always love that.
We'll only get to see about 50 seconds of it, and
that's a good point.
That's all right. That's all right.
Ideally.
Yeah. All right. We will be back next week, like we said, with a pay-per-view preview. We've got UFC 321 321. Once again, we're getting to big numbers here. Tom Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane in the main event. Co-main event, Verna Jandiroba and Mackenzie Dern for the women's strawweight title. Can you believe it? So that should be a pretty good card, even if that's obviously not the best co-main in the world. But we're heating up here with some good pay-per-views to close out the year. And that's going to be the high points. And then, so we'll be back more frequently. I know we missed a couple weeks here, but we will be back with frequency for the 8-Sided Freaks podcast. Make sure to check out the website, VendetteSportsMedia.com, and like and subscribe on the YouTube channel here. And make sure you tune in next week. But most importantly, thank you for watching this week, and we will see you next time.